Hello again. Hope you all are well. Today I would like to speak about communication. This is a subject that I don't think can be overstated in its importance. And yet, I believe a lot of us take it for granted. We say something to someone and we just automatically assume that they understand what we were trying to communicate to them. But oftentimes, the understanding is different on the other side. This can create all kinds of troubles in our everyday lives, whether it's a romantic relationship, parent child, coworker, boss, you name it, pretty much across the board. Communication between any two people, when misunderstood, can cause all kinds of problems. I believe it's very important to understand that we can be misunderstood and oftentimes are misunderstood, maybe not because we haven't communicated clearly, but because the other person has an understanding of what we said that is different than ours. How can this happen, you say? After all, words mean what they mean, right? Actually, that's not entirely true. In fact, in the English language alone, there are many words that are spelled the same that have opposite meanings based upon the context of the sentence that they're in. Many other words that sound the same but are spelled differently have different meanings. But even beyond that, who we are as a person, what we've experienced in our life, how we've processed those experiences, all come into play when we're trying to communicate. On top of that, where we're at the moment, what we happen to be thinking about when the communication comes in, all of these things can play a role in our understanding of what the other person is saying. Tone of voice, body language, all these things are cues as to the meaning of what we're hearing. Also, I believe a lot of times we tend to shirk our part of the responsibility on the listening side of a conversation. It's easy to get involved in our heads in what we want to say in response, or what happened earlier in the day, or something that we have to attend to later. And by doing that, we can take away from our understanding of what's being said in the moment. If you go even deeper into the rabbit hole, each one of us has experienced life differently. We've had different circumstances. We've responded to those circumstances differently. We've understood those circumstances differently. And we've had to learn to survive and live in the world in a unique way. All of these things can lend themselves to difficulties in communication. Now add to that different cultural beliefs, possibly even different languages, and you can see where communication and language can be very messy. So how can we improve upon this? Well, first of all, I think it's important, as with any problem, to understand that there is a problem. So if you have difficulty communicating with, say, your romantic partner, perhaps you have the same conversation over and over again, but always seem to come back to it for some reason. The first step might be in mirroring each other. So by that, what I mean is allow one person to speak, the other person listens, and then when the first person is done speaking, the second person mirrors back to them what they just heard. In other words, I understand that what you're saying is X. Be very clear and complete and see if that's what the person actually was trying to say or not. In this way, you can begin to see where communication breaks down and just how far south it can go. Something that's very important in communication is to take responsibility for how we feel, not try to make the other person responsible for that. So, in other words, instead of saying, "You make me so angry," I can say, "When you display this behavior, I get angry." Now, you may wonder what the difference is between those two. But in the first one, I'm actually blaming my partner for how I feel. In the second one, I'm taking responsibility for how I feel. What this does is it frees them up to not become defensive about it and to try and understand where I'm coming from. Once a person becomes defensive in any communication, I believe that the communication itself breaks down to a point where many things can go wrong. Now, oftentimes it's much better when we start to become emotional, whether it's defensive, angry, fearful, to go somewhere and deal with our emotions first and then come back. Now, I'm not suggesting here that we just leave and avoid the situation. However, when emotions reach a certain level, they really begin to affect our understanding of what we're experiencing. Dr. Joe Dispenza says that we cannot believe, accept, or surrender to any information that isn't equal to our emotional state. Now, what this looks like is if your child is throwing a temper tantrum, you can speak to them in the kindest voice. You can tell them very loving, very matter-of-fact information. You can say all the right things, but in their emotional upset, they can't hear it. It won't get past the emotions that they're feeling. This is also true of adults, any age. If we're really upset, we can hear the upset words coming at us, but really nothing beyond that sinks in. That's why I believe it's critical to recognize when we cross this threshold and then take a time out, remove ourselves from the situation, go and deal with our emotions in a healthy manner, and then come back when we're more calm and able to hear what the other person is saying. When both people are angry and shouting, this becomes very difficult to do. Each person is really trying to get their point across and is frustrated more and more by the fact that it doesn't seem to be working. At this point, we get to a place where we're in fight or flight mode, and at that point, all bets are off. The things that we can say can be very hurtful and mean. Things that we would never say when we're calm, but that part of our brain can be very primitive. Now, this can go a long way toward degrading trust in the relationship. And once things are said, some things can't be unsaid. If this is a repeating pattern in our relationships, you can imagine the damage that can be created over time. So two people that care about each other, whether it's romantically or friends that get along well, or even coworkers that get along well, over time, and these negative types of experiences in communication can lose any kind of goodwill they had toward the other person. Now let's get into some specifics here. Let's say that growing up, a person learns that to be accepted for who and what they are, they have to contribute something specific. Now let's say you had to behave a certain way as a child or be yelled at. Maybe you had to get certain grades in school. Maybe you had to achieve something on a sports team. Perhaps you just had to do certain chores. Now, none of these things are bad in and of themselves, but the level or degree to which these are militaristically enforced can really sway how we come to see ourselves and what we believe our worth is based on. Now, let's say that you've come to a place in your life where you feel like to get someone to like you, it's important for you to do things for them or to sacrifice for them. Something like this is typically learned at a young age, a coping skill, and as we get older, it can become automatic. So when we meet someone new that we like, and that we want to be liked by, it can be very easy to fall into the pattern of doing anything and everything for this person and expecting nothing in return, or accepting little in return, or whatever the other person is capable of giving. It's important here to understand that this is a subconscious thing. Not everyone will be aware of this type of behavior in themselves or other people. So if I'm unconsciously giving and giving and giving, and in a specific communication my partner is asking me for something, perhaps I've gotten to the point where I'm really tired and frustrated because I'm giving too much of myself, and somewhere inside of me I know that's not how it's supposed to be. I might become upset at that moment and lash out at the person. Whereas to them, they're just having a normal conversation and asking me to do something. This type of situation can leave both parties bewildered. One person wondering, what on earth did I say that was so wrong? Or the other person wondering, why can't you just see me and value me for what I am and not for what I do? We are all in varying stages of our growth, our evolution, if you will. And typically, most of us are not in the same exact place as the people we interact with. So in a sense, it's very much like we're speaking different languages. In some ways, it's even worse because we really don't understand that we're speaking different languages, but what we're saying and what the other person is hearing are completely different. With this example, I think you can probably see how important it is that I understand that I am responsible for myself, for my well-being, for my feelings, for my actions, and that my partner is responsible for themselves in the same way. The other person is not going to fill a hole that's inside of me, even if it might feel that he or she did in the beginning. I believe that each of us have specific circumstances in childhood. My particular belief is that we choose those before we come here. And we do so with an idea that these particular circumstances will help us evolve in a certain way. In my next video, I will lean into this idea a little further and try to come up with some ways where we can improve on our communication. May peace and harmony find you.